Greetings and salutations, friends. I'm Prince Amari, gay dating coach, matchmaker, #1 best-selling author of Lasting Love at Last, the gay guide to attracting the relationship of your dreams. And in this video, we're talking about whether or not you actually have time for a relationship, all right? Because the people say they want consistency, but a lot of people don't even have time themselves to create something consistent. So we're gonna look at what consistency actually means in a relationship, how much time is required, and how to know whether you or someone else has that amount of time necessary to create a consistent, happy, fulfilling relationship. Now, first things first, when we think of being ready for a relationship, there are 4 pillars of relationship readiness. The first is realistic expectations. The second is emotional availability. The third is self-confidence. And then the fourth is lifestyle capacity, which is specifically what we're talking about today. Do you have the time? Do you have the money for a relationship? We'll probably cover the money piece in another video. If y'all want to request that, let me know in the comments and I'll see if we get enough likes or desire to make that video about how much money does it take to date effectively. Now, moving right along, when we think of time in a relationship, there's one important measurement that we need to be aware of. It's going to take about 100 hours, as little as 20, but generally about 100 hours of spending quality time with someone to know their patterns enough to determine if you can actually trust them, all right? To build that trust requires knowing the person's patterns, and to know their patterns, you just got to spend the time, 100 hours, all right? And so at minimum, you need about 5 hours a week to consistently see someone for that trust to become established. If you have less than 5 hours a week with a single person, all right, it's gonna feel like you don't exist in their world. And so that 5 hours, if you think of like an average date, you're spending 2 to 4 hours ish together. You got the time that you're getting ready, the planning time, like all that stuff, the debrief, right? The thinking about it and processing how you feel about the date after the date. So altogether, let's say an average date takes about 5 hours a week to really like have that sturdiness and consistency feel sustainable. And so with that 100 number, if you only have 5 hours a week, it's going to take you about 20 weeks to get to 100 hours. So that's about 6 months, right? If you have more time than that, it's going to go faster. Less time than that doesn't mean you can't get into a relationship. It just means that it's going to take a lot longer. And so 5 hours is the minimum, not recommended, right? You need about 10 to 15 hours a week to date effectively. But if you have less than 5, it's just not gonna cut it. All right. Now let's talk about an example of this. So we all probably know someone or heard of a couple who met and then like a month or 2 later they got married. Not just we go together now, they got actually married and they've still been together like 50, 60 years. Then we know other people who, friend, it's been a year and y'all don't even know if y'all go together, right? And the difference often goes back to how much quality time you're spending together. So in that first couple's example, they met, they didn't spend any days apart for that first month. And so they got to those 100 hours, they know each other's patterns, and they can confidently, reasonably say yes to committing to that person, right? In the other case, I saw you once a month, once every other week, and 12 months later, I'm still like, I don't know this person, right? So that's what happens. Now, what we're gonna do is calculate how much time you actually have available, and then look at that amount of time in terms of the levels of consistency you're able to sustain in a relationship. And of course, I got our handy dandy example board so we can see what that looks like. So don't worry, there's no algebra in this math problem. It's all just addition and subtraction with numbers you already know or can easily figure out, all right? So first things first, in a typical week, in every week, we only have 168 hours, right? 168 hours in a week, 7 days times 24 hours, 168, that's what I got there, right? And you should be sleep 56 of those hours, allegedly, right? If you're getting that 8 hours of sleep. So let's just call that. And then you have duty time. So these are all the commitments you have, right? So we have work duties, we have school duties, we have caretaking duties and community duties. And what that looks like is, say for work, you have a 40-hour-a-week job, but you also want to count the time it takes to get ready and your commute. So say like your commute is 45 minutes each way. So in a single day, that's an hour and a half, and it takes you 30 minutes to get ready. So that's 2 hours times 5 days a week is 10 hours plus your 40 hours that you work. That's how we got to 50, right? Okay, so 50 hours a week. School, same thing. Let's say you're taking 2 classes. You're working a full-time job and you're taking 2 classes at night and they're both 3 credit hour classes, which means, of course, if you're in school, if you don't, ignore this part, but if you either are in school or have ever been in school, you probably remember the credit hour thing. For every hour you're in class, you should be spending 3 hours outside of class per credit hour to do the homework, the research, the right, whatever you got to do. So if you're in a class and it's a 3 hour class, then you should be spending 9 hours outside of class. So that's 12 hours together, right? And then we got 2 classes, so it's 24 hours. Great. And then caretaking. This is going to be taking care of, say, an elder family member or a kid or any sort of like family time that you have to be present for on a consistent basis, right? Caretaking. And then your community duties are going to be, say you volunteer on a board or for an organization, maybe you sing in the church choir, or you have a weekly game night with friends, right? That's really consistent. So anything you do consistently in a community that you've committed duties to, you can put here. This can also include, maybe you have a weekly, say, Sunday fun day with friends or Sunday brunch or something. You can put that there too. So all of your commitments, we want to total those up, and altogether in this example, that gave us 92 hours. So then we take 168 minus our sleep time and our duty time, and that gives us 20 hours of free time available. Which brings us to a very interesting rule. I call this the me time rule. We all need about 1 to 2 hours a day, depending on our level of introversion or extroversion, to ourselves for restorative rest and relaxation. And so that's on average about 10 hours a week, right? And so the me time rule is, if you don't have time for you, you definitely don't have time for a relationship. So we gotta account for the time you need for yourself before we can look at the time you have to spend with other people in a romantic context, all right? So free time minus me time equals we time. And in this example, we have about 10 hours of we time available per week, all right? So we can date for 10 hours a week. Now let's go to our little levels chart, because again, there's levels to this. And I call this the temporal availability levels, or time availability, right? So level 1 is you don't have any availability. This is 0 hours a week after we did that calculation, right? A relationship can't fit into your life right now. Dating can't even fit into your life. So before you even are trying to go on a date or start a profile on a dating app, we need to clear that schedule and get you some time, because you probably don't even have time for yourself in this example, especially if it's like negative, that number that we just calculated. But even if it's 0 hours, you just are at the brim. You don't really have any buffer. You're probably experiencing a lot of stress already, and maybe it's even cutting into your sleep time. So you're not even getting the recommended 8 hours in bed. Even if you're not sleeping the whole time, you're not even getting 8 hours in bed, probably because you're overextended, right? So because you're at the limit, any sort of emergency, any sort of situation outside of the norm is really gonna stress you out a lot. So relationship is not even on the map for you right now. We gotta fix that calendar. Level 2 is what we call inconsistent availability. So this is having between 1 and 4 hours a week. Earlier we talked about needing 5 hours minimum for a relationship to be viable, to spend time with a single person, right? And if you only have 1 to 4 hours, this means I might see you once every other week or less, if that, right? Maybe once a month. So the people who it seems like things are cool, seems like they like us, but like we just never see them, and they're kind of more like a figment of our imagination. It's very like situationshipy, right? If it even gets to that point, 1 to 4 hours a week is very inconsistent. I can't even show up for you when I want to, let alone when you need me, all right? Level 3 is that baseline availability. It's limited, so we only have 5 hours a week generally, up to maybe 9-ish. So I can see you once a week, maybe twice. But the thing about this is, if both partners have limited availability and the availability you have doesn't match up, you're still not gonna be able to see each other, right? So I got 5 hours a week. I can see you on Wednesdays each week, and you got 5 hours, but you can only see me on Saturdays. The math ain't mathing, the schedules don't match up, the relationship doesn't grow, okay? Then level 4, now we have 10 to 14, 15 hours a week. We have consistent availability. I can see you 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more on occasion, but like this is a healthy level. It's easy, reliable, dependable for you to be able to show up for me when I need you when we get to that point, but also when I want to. Like, I just want to get to know you. It's enough time to spend with you, not feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed, right? And then level 5, you can probably barely see this a little bit because of that color, but this is abundant availability. We have more than 15 hours a week. This is probably not the issue that's coming up for you in terms of why you might be struggling in relationships. Now, when we're looking at the other person's time, different story, because we need to, know how much time they have available as well. And that's something you can ask somebody when you were first dating. How many times a week minimum do you expect to see someone that you're dating and getting to know? And again, if we take however much time they have or you have and divide it by 5, that tells us how many times I can see you. But if they say 2 to 3 times a week, all right, cool. We know that their expectation is at least here. If they're like, oh, maybe once a week, they talking about that limited availability. And if they're like, I mean, every other week or something, like, no, it's just not gonna work. So anything under level 3 is not viable for a relationship. 0 hours or 1 to 4 hours a week, not viable for a relationship or to be dating. And the other thing you can think about is, what about dating multiple people? Because this is just if you're dating one person, okay? If you're at level 2, you got 4 hours a week. That's for one person. When we start talking about dating multiple people, for every person, let's just say 2 people. If you have consistent availability for 2 people, that means you really have limited availability for one person in those 2, okay? If you have limited availability already for one person, you have inconsistent availability if you're dating 2 people at the same time, right? And so, in other words, if you want to date multiple people, you need to have at least 10 or 15 or more hours a week to do that. Or else you're not going to date either of those people effectively, and you're going to be showing up inconsistently in those situations, right? So, in other words, you got to know how much time you have and then how much time is required to get to know people, because otherwise your expectations are going to get in the way of your ability to show up and develop something real. So let me just make sure I covered all my notes. Another fun thing though, so I mentioned the 20 to 100 hours it takes to get to know someone. The average long-term relationship, the partners commit in just 6 dates, right? So we talk about 20 to 100 hours, 6 dates. If I'm spending 4 hours with you on a date, that's 24 hours plus the time we've talked in between, the quality conversations and all of that, right? But yeah, the average couple, it just takes 6 dates. And this is often talking about couples who are spending at least 10 to 15 hours a week getting to know each other and have that amount of space. Now, going back to emotional availability, realistic expectations, self-confidence, right? You are ready in all the other ways. If you don't have the time, the relationship's not going to develop. Now, this especially connects to emotional availability. Sometimes we assume that someone is not emotionally available because they're not able to show up consistently. And they are distinct, but they are absolutely related. Because if you don't have the time for yourself, you don't have the time to process spending time with someone else, and you're going to start to resent anybody who wants more of your time when you don't even have enough for you, right? And so not having time available can encroach on emotional availability, but not from the place of like there's somebody from your past or some childhood wounds. It's just I don't have the time to emotionally process, right? Because you need time to do that. And so hope this was helpful. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. If you want to know more, I mentioned the whole time or how much money you need today. If you want to see what those levels look like, let me know in the comments. And lots of other resources in the video link, especially the dating skill quiz, because we just talked about the time and the readiness. The number one reason anybody is single is because they're trying to have a level 25 relationship with level 3 dating skills. So you can actually take the dating skill quiz at the link in the description, and it'll tell you what level your skills are at. Because if you don't have the skills or the capacity to date, then we know why you're struggling with a relationship. So again, I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think. Let me know what's on your mind in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Sending you love, peace, and glitter. Adios.